So, hey, good morning, everyone. So glad to have you here. We started last week a 4-part series. It's called Moving Forward. And what we're doing in this series is we're talking about different things and different events and issues in our life that we experience and how we move forward from them. And the purpose behind that is to help prevent our past from destroying our present and our future moving forward. So today we're going to be talking about how do we move forward from loss. So last week we talked about how do you move forward from abuse. That is up on the website or on the Facebook page if you'd like to go see that. But today we're going to talk about how do we move forward from loss of loved ones in our life. Now, like last week, this is an extremely sensitive topic. So before we dig into it here, I just want to give a few boundaries or a few things I ask of you before I dig into this topic. So the first one is this. Understand today's message is not a substitute for professional counseling if you need professional counseling due to loss or something in your life. So I still highly recommend you get professional counseling because they can do really good stuff with you one-on-one. That can't be done here on a Sunday morning type format. Number two, I just want you to grant me some grace. Since this is a very emotional topic, due to that, you might hear me say things I didn't actually say because I say something that engages your emotions, and then you just start clicking back into different emotions in your life, and you start thinking I'm saying things I might not be saying. So from past experience, what I'd have you do is if you hear that, take some time on Tuesday and go listen to the recording so you can walk through this, because I've been very purposeful in what I'm saying in these last 2 messages to make sure I don't do or say things that you can take offense to or read wrong. So just know that's been thought through very carefully on that front. Number 3 is this. I have very limited time this morning in this type of a format. So last week I went a little long, I went like 35 minutes. This week it'll probably be around 30, 35 just because they're sensitive topics. But all I can really do here is lay a groundwork for you to work from. I cannot cover every issue in this topic or go real into depth on this topic, but I can give you the groundwork that then you can build off of, and that is what my goal here is today. So that's what I'd just ask of you to grant me as we dig into this topic. Now, here's the thing. To some degree, every one of us sitting here this morning has an entitlement mindset towards life and what life should be. And it goes something like this. This is what our entitlement mindset tells us, is that we should be born, so we're born, and then from that point we should live in a loving family. And perhaps, or we prefer at least a middle-class family or above, we're fairly comfortable in the family that we're born into. We expect that we will grow up without many issues, that we'll find the love of our life at some point, we'll get married to them, possibly have a couple of good kids that behave fairly well and are decent kids and grow up well, and they follow the same path we just went through. Eventually, we get some grandkids from our kids, and then at some point in the future, we actually pass away from this life content and peacefully, and we just kind of go away and we pass away into time and we join God in heaven. Now, that doesn't even sound that crazy when I go through that list, because we actually think that's what we're all entitled to. Like, that's actually what life should be for us. And we believe that is what our expectation should be and what we deserve to get in this life. But because of that entitlement mindset, anything that deviates from that storyline that you see up there as seen as us getting robbed of something that we deserve, because we have this entitlement mindset. And the biggest robbing from any of us that we can experience in this life is when we lose someone that we love that we don't think we should have lost yet. And we feel like in those moments we've really been robbed of what we deserve and what we're entitled to receive in this life. Now, as I talked about last week, I talked about these things called rogue waves, and the rogue waves created by humanity's sin and how they interrupt that storyline, and so it never ends up actually being true in most of our lives. And what I want to do real quick is just recap what a rogue wave is. There's a couple of pictures of them here. You can see these huge waves are coming at these boats. But what a rogue wave is, as I told you last week, they used to be thought as of fairy tales, that sailors would come back and talk about glassy seas. It was all nice. And this huge wave came out of nowhere and almost sunk their ship. A lot of ships that disappear at sea, they believe, are caused by rogue waves. And what they simply are is all the little ripples and all the little waves in the sea at times converge, and they create these random huge rogue waves. And they can be from anywhere from like 10 feet to 70 to 80 feet high. And they can hit on sunny days with glass seas where there's not even white caps, and a huge wave can just come and wipe. We've started to record them because now you have video cameras and cameras everywhere, and we're starting to actually get them on video. And so now people are going, these things actually exist. And I compared that to life and how sin works in humanity, which is we all sin, and we talked about this last week, and each of those sins create a ripple or a wave of consequence around us. And through humanity, all these ripples and these waves, small or big, are crashing around, and from time to time, they form into rogue waves of sin and consequences of sin, and they just hit us. And the thing is we have no control over when or how those rogue waves will hit us in our lives. Last week, we talked about how at some points, for some people, they turn into abusers. And those abusers are those rogue waves that come in and hurt you and destroy your life and cause issues in your life. And this week, we're going to talk about the issue of death and how that is one of those rogue waves that comes in that can be devastating to our lives, yet we have zero control over how and when they happen. They just hit us. Now, let me share some truths to you about loss, okay? Here's 4 truths about loss. Number 1 is this: it will happen to you, okay? You cannot do anything to stop it. You can't do anything to avoid it. If you live on this earth long enough, you will run into death of a loved one and someone that you really care for that passes away either unexpectedly or expectedly. You cannot avoid it. Truth number 2 is this: time doesn't heal all wounds, and this is one of them. There's that phrase that time heals all wounds, and with loss, it never does. It never fully heals the wounds of loss. Those things never fully get healed. Truth number 3, though, is this: although we might never fully heal, we can learn how to move forward from loss, but that moving forward destination will look different than the normal we had before we experienced that loss. So you will never get back to that former normal. You will have to develop a new normal that will look different than the old one, but you can move forward. And truth number 4 is this: that new normal that you can create will allow you to once again experience joy, happiness, and meaning in your life, even though it might look different than the old joy, happiness, and meaning that you enjoy back in your old normal. You can experience those things once again. Now, when it comes to death, I have a very unique position in life to understand the consequences created by loss because of the position I hold. Let me just give you a little bit of information about me. At this point, I am 45 years old. I have performed 46 funerals over my career. So I've been in ministry for 20... When did I start? Well, I became a Christian at 20, and I started at like 21, so I'm, 24 years into this, and I've done 46 funerals at this point. I have watched 8 people take their last breath on this earth. So I've been there when 8 people have taken their last breath and then left here. I have buried a murdered 2-year-old and had to do that funeral and work with that family. I've buried a 17-year-old who died of cancer who was like extended family to me. I've buried several friends who were here today, and the next day just gone, and you didn't even see it coming. I've buried them. I've watched my wife go through the delivery of a miscarriage and had to go through that whole experience. I've watched my own father die of cancer, and I sat with a wife and her children of one of my friends who was murdered on his job. I have seen pretty much everything to do with death. Now, the thing that makes my job unique is not seeing death up front and in my face. A lot of jobs see that, where they see death. What's unique to my job is this: I see the crisis before death, I see death, and then I see the consequences on death of the loved ones left behind. I see all 3 aspects of that. I just don't work in one area. I see all those different aspects. And I think this is probably one of the few jobs or only job that actually deals with all 3 aspects of death and has to work within that field. So what I want to do this morning is this. I'm just going to go through 3 results of loss on those that are left behind and kind of give a biblical perspective. I think will help you in the process of moving forward from that loss in your life. So these are the 3 big things I would say that I have seen that people suffer that are left here behind after someone else leaves. The first 2 I would say are unavoidable. There's nothing you can do about the first 2. You will experience these when you suffer loss. The third one, though, is usually more self-imposed, and we'll get to that when we get there. So let me start with result 1 of the loss of someone that we love. And the first one is this: it's intense sadness. okay? Intense sadness. This is unavoidable due to being emotional creatures. If you've ever loved someone and you've lost them, the sadness and the grief that goes along with losing them, it's indescribable. It's hard to put into words for other people what it feels like, other than you just know there's a huge void left in your life that's no longer filled. And that's filled with sadness and grief, and it sits there. Here's something that's important for all of us to understand. There is no timetable, and there is no normal of how to react to this intense sadness. Everyone handles it in different ways. And one of the things we have to be careful of as a church body is a lot of times we like to tell people how to get over their sadness and move on from their sadness. And you have to be careful. You don't know what's best for them because everyone's created differently and we all handle it in different ways. And so we need to be there as a support for each other, but not to be there to tell them how they're supposed to handle it, because you really don't know how they're designed and how God wants them to handle it and how God's going to minister to them through that. Be careful of that. Be there as a support system, not necessarily the answer person, okay? But there is no timetable or normal of how to react to the sadness. But there are a couple of things you can do that will help you with this wound, to help minister to it and help heal it some, never being fully healed, but how to help find some healing to it, allow it to scab over some. The two big things are this. Number one is prayer. Pray to God. In your silent times, in your times when you are alone, talk to God, be honest with Him about everything you're feeling, and pour that out to Him. It helps immensely, because there are things you can say to God that you will never say to another human being. And so prayer is key in healing the wound of loss. Let me read you a couple of scriptures. In Psalms 34:18, it says this: "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted, and He rescues those whose spirits are crushed." And it's just basically saying God cares. Okay, God knows your heart's broken. God knows you're suffering this intense sadness, and God is there to help. All right? In 1 Peter 5:7, it says this: "Give all of your worries and cares to God, for He cares about you." All right? Which again is just letting you know, God doesn't know, or God isn't unaware of the pain you're suffering. He's not unaware of the sadness in your life. He's fully aware of it. So go to Him and express it. And I guarantee you it's helpful. It's really a healing thing. Will He fully know? Because it's not going to replace the person that's lost. But it does start the process of healing to some degree. The second thing I would tell you to do, and we hit on this one a little bit last week, which is talk to others who have suffered similar loss. And this is key to the last part of this. Just don't talk to other people. Talk to other people who are going through what you've gone through. Okay? So again, I hit this last week, but it's what I love about the church is God can take our pain that we have suffered and use it in positive ways to help others. And so here's what it says in 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 3 and 4. It says, "All praise to God, the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. God is our merciful Father and the source of all comfort. He comforts us in our troubles so that we can comfort others. When they are troubled, we will be able to give them the same comfort God has given us." All right? So it's God going, there's a purpose, as we talked about last week, a purpose to your pain, that you can find a purpose still in that pain that you have in your life. So if you are going through the trauma of loss, and you're in a church community, what I would tell you to do is talk to a leader in the church, and we can usually connect you to other people in the church that we know have that pain that you might not be aware of. But I can pretty much guarantee you, just like abuse last week, if you've gone through it, we know people in the church who've gone through it as well and have come out the other side, and they can be a huge asset to you because they know exactly what you're feeling and what your emotions are and what you're going through, and they're not just guessing at it. They will sit with you and go, "You're probably feeling this," and you'll go, "Yeah, well, here's what I did." Or "You're probably feeling this," and you'll be like, "How do you know this stuff?" I went through it. Okay? Very valuable to talk to other people who've gone through similar situations. I highly always encourage people to highly go talk in group therapy, or groups of church, or individuals in church. So like, for instance, recently I had a lady who lost her husband. And I was like, you know what? We have this women's Bible study on Sunday mornings. There's a bunch of other widows in that group. These are people who have already gone what you've gone through, and they're 5 years from it, 7 years from it, 10 years from it. They can help you go through the experiences you're going to go through. It's extremely valuable to have those situations in your life. The second result of loss, I call it dual realities. I don't know if there's like an actual like counseling term for this. I don't know. This is just what I've seen and I've experienced in my own life. And so the best way I can describe it is dual realities. And this one is also unavoidable. It's simply a natural result of loss in your life. And here's what it is. When you lose someone that you love and that's close to you, instantly your one reality splits into two. And the best way I can describe these two realities is one becomes an emotional reality and one is an actual reality. Now, most people in the world, after you lose your loved one, continue on in actual reality, which is they will come and they'll say kind words to you. They'll come to the funeral home for viewings. They'll come to the funeral. And then the next day, guess what they do? They wake up, they put their clothes on, and they go back to work. And life continues on, and they continue to do what they do, and life continues on knowing that they went to a funeral and they experienced someone else's funeral. For you, though, a few of you in those situations, what happens is another reality develops, which is an emotional reality, which is there's this actual reality where life continues to move on and the world continues to move on, but emotionally you can't accept it and your emotions won't let you understand that that's true. The time I experienced this most is when we lost our middle child, and Autumn had a miscarriage and we had to deliver, and I told you about the Owasso, like I can never go to the Owasso hospital up there again, to the ER, because I still can envision the doors of the ER opening when I was taking her in there, knowing what was happening. I cannot go in that hospital. Emotionally, it triggers me, and you know I'm not an emotional guy. Emotionally, it triggers me. I've had to do it one time, go in there, and I just can't do it. So I have to go through other doors and stuff to go to that ER because I can't go through that door. But what I do remember is, in that case, we'd already put a room together at home. We had a crib set up. We had painted the room and everything, and we were getting it all ready for a baby, and then your baby's gone. Okay? And I remember it took months for my emotions to accept and understand we weren't still having a baby. And so I could verbally tell you that we lost our baby, but emotionally I still felt like we're having a baby, because I would go home and there's that room, and I remember painting the room, and we're prepping our entire lives, getting it ready for this next kid, but the kid's never coming. And so you have these dual realities that everyone else is living life, going on, accepting reality, and then you know that's true, but emotionally you don't know it's true. And so there's this dual reality thing that you're split into, and it's very odd. How many of you went through loss before? You know what I'm talking about? Okay. It's odd. It's the weirdest thing in the world, because you understand it's happening, but you can't do anything to get out of it. And so I call it dual reality, and what happens is there is no biblical principle I can tell you how you get over this. Naturally, just over time, they reconverge. And then over time, reality and emotion become one thing again, and you're back into just one reality, and life eventually continues to move forward with that pain in the background. And it's still there, and you're still wounded, it still hurts, but it's gone. You've moved forward to a different place, and now you're back to one reality. So it just naturally takes place. The only exception of this is to those who actively resist having the two rejoin. So what happens to some people is they simply cannot accept that their loved one is gone, and so they cling and they hold on to the emotional reality and will not let it go, and they will do everything they can to recreate that reality and make that truth and make that the actual reality. What I would tell you is this: if you are either in that situation or you know loved ones who are in that situation, you can see them holding on to that emotional reality, you really need to get them help. They need to find professional counseling. They need to find people they can talk to, because the thing is, if they cannot release an emotional reality, it will destroy every aspect of their life, and they spin out of control into this very place. And so it's essential that when we see people who get stuck there and who continue to just hold on to it and recreate it, that we step in at some point and try to help them through that and go, we got to get you help, or things will never get better. And it just spirals out of control, and they go to very, very dark places that are not healthy. Okay, that's the one exception. So that's the second result. Now, both of those are things nothing you can do about. They're just going to happen. You lose someone you love, you're going to have intense sadness, you're going to have dual realities created. I gave you some ways that you can work through those, or how time helps you work through that. The third one is this. It's anger at God. Okay? So the third result of losing someone that you love is anger at God. The younger the one lost, the more intense this result tends to be. So the younger the person is that you lose, the more intense you tend to have anger at God. You see this result in people's lives. Now the thing is about anger at God, This one tends to be more self-imposed due to our entitlement mentality that I started with. Okay? This is one that can be greatly navigated beyond, never actually get into, if you know how to think about things on the front side of things. But what happens is it's usually self-imposed because we actually believe that entitlement mentality is what we deserve and what we should get. So when death comes into that process and cuts it off and destroys the rest of that entitlement process, the younger it is, the more things you lose. The more angry we tend to get at God. And so what I would tell you to do is how you can largely prevent this from happening in your life and the anger towards God thing happening. It takes work before loss ever comes. So today, even if you've never suffered loss or you're not in intense sadness or dual realities right now and you're just sitting here, the way you prevent the anger at God is doing work now before you suffer the loss. Because you're going to have the intense sadness, you're going to have dual realities, but you don't have to have anger at God. So here's what you can do beforehand. Let me start you with Philippians chapter 4, verses 6 through 8. It says this: don't worry about anything, instead pray about everything. So we already hit that part. Tell God what you need and thank Him for all He has done. I want to highlight that last phrase there for a second. And thank Him for all He has done. This is assuming the things you pray about, you remember you pray about, therefore you're able to thank God for the things He's already done. All right? It assumes that you don't take things for granted in your life and you appreciate the blessings that God gives you and any good that you have in your life. It assumes that you're doing that regularly and thanking God that you got through that day and your loved ones are still with you. It's assuming that because it's telling you and thank Him for all He has done, things He's already accomplished. It goes on, it says, if you would do that, then you will experience God's peace, which exceeds anything we can understand. His peace will guard our hearts and minds as we live in Christ Jesus. So it says, if you learn this process, if you learn this thankfulness part here, that even when these other times come, you will have a peace that the world doesn't. You'll find peace that they can't comprehend and that you can't even fully comprehend, that God just calms you and He gives you a peace. So instead of having anger towards Him, you find peace through Him. And that is a key thing. When the way we do this is this: we have to change how we view this world. We have to start looking at each day as a blessing that we have our loved ones around us, rather than feeling entitled that they should be with us and taking them for granted. And you hear this line a lot from people who just lost someone they loved. They always say something like this: don't ever take for granted the people that you love. Make sure you thank God every day and thank God that they made it through today. Don't ever take that for granted. You hear that all the time. The reason is they're finding out in that moment, I should have taken all that other stuff for granted because I just lost them. All right? And so this mindset we have to develop is this: you aren't entitled to that wonderful life we put up on the screen. That's not what we're entitled to. We are sinful people. We screwed up the entire creation. We cause ripples and waves because of the consequences of our sin that cause rogue waves, that cause horrible things to happen in this world. And that's on us, as we talked about last week, not on God. And so we're not entitled to anything good. And when you get that mindset and understand that you're not entitled to anything good, what happens is anything good happening in your life, you become really thankful for. That you still have your kids. Every day when I wake up or I go to bed, I'm thankful I still have my 2 kids that are alive with me. I'm thankful I live in a house that I go has heat and has air conditioning and it's comfortable, and I have the money I need to just go buy things. And I'm thankful for that. I pray about it every single night, and I thank God for that because I understand I don't deserve any of it, because all I deserve is crud. Okay? The best way to say all I deserve is crap. That's what I deserve. I know what my sin caused. Okay, I know the ripples my sin causes on this world, and to think I deserve good stuff's insane. From the creator of the universe, who I broke his whole system. That's insane. So I look at anything good and go, God, you've blessed me. And even though I had 5 bad things happen today, my kids are still alive today. Thank you. Thank you, because I don't deserve that. And if I got them another day, thank God I got them another day. And we become thankful and we change how we view the whole world. Then what happens is this: when we have that mindset prepared now, when loss comes our way, which it will, what happens is after the intense sadness dies down some and the dual realities come back to one, what you're left with is gratefulness for the time you had with that loved one rather than bitterness gone. and that is key, is you'll find gratefulness for all those moments you had instead of bitterness for them being gone. Because you'll realize if they're 7 years old, you know what? I got 7 years with them. And I have 7 years of memories with them. And you know what? With those 7 years of memories, there's a lot of people I could run into that only got 2 years. I got a bonus 5 over them. Or maybe they died at 75 years old, and you're going, I got 75 good years with that person and memories with that person. How can I not be grateful for it? I'll tell you, with my middle child that I lost, I find gratefulness for it. Let me tell you how. Never knew them, never got to meet them. All I saw was the results afterwards, and it was horrible, okay? Here's one thing I do know. They never have to live in this world and experience rogue waves. Never. They could go right be with Jesus. I'm grateful for that. My kid escapes it. I'll see them someday, and I'll get to know them in heaven, and I'll be grateful for that. But they never have to go through the garbage we all have gone through in our lives. They escape all that scot-free and never know it, never experienced it, never had to deal with it, all right? I can find gratefulness in that. So even in those moments, I can find gratefulness because I understand I was never entitled to them in the first place. If I got them, it was a gift from God. It was a blessing I don't deserve. That mindset can help disperse that anger at God that we tend to have if we're thinking we're entitled, okay? Here's the thing. How we handle loss as followers of Jesus Christ does matter. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verses 13 and 14, it reads this. And now, dear brothers and sisters, we want you to know what will happen to the believers who have died, so you will not grieve like people who have no hope. Okay, it says, as Christians, he wants you to know what's going to happen to them, so you will not grieve like people out there who have no hope. It says, for since we believe that Jesus died and was raised to life again, we also believe that when Jesus returns, God will bring back with him the believers who have died. Here's what we know as Christians. People who die who know Christ, they're not dead. They're gone from here. Okay? And we will be rejoined with them someday in God's presence in heaven. All we are is separated for a little while. And in the scheme of eternity, it's not that long. We're just separated for a while. Those that I have loved, that I have lost, I will see them again in heaven. All right? We know that to be true. As followers of Jesus Christ, we know this is not the end, and we should live as if this is not the end. How we handle loss reveals a lot about what we truly believe about how this world functions in our spiritual lives and the eternal and all that. How we handle loss really brings that to the forefront of what we truly believe. That does not mean it takes away the intense sadness. It does not mean it takes away the dual reality. But what it does mean is how we handle it long term says a lot about what we really believe. Because of Jesus' life, death, and resurrection, we have the capability to move forward from loss to a new normal where we can still experience joy, happiness, and meaning in this life. And for that, we should just say, thank you, God. Would you pray with me? Heavenly Father,